I trusted my best friend with my life. He ruined it. I don't really know how to start this without sounding dramatic, but I guess the truth is that this whole thing didn't feel dramatic while it was happening. It felt normal, comfortable, like something I never needed to question, and that's probably what makes it hurt as much as it does now. I met Evan when we were 16. Same math class, same last names near each other alphabetically, same board expressions while the teacher talked about things neither of us cared about. We didn't instantly become best friends or anything like that. At first, it was just small stuff, borrowing a pen, whispering jokes, walking the same way after school. But over time, it turned into something solid, predictable, reliable. By the time we graduated, Evan wasn't just my best friend. He was the person who knew everything about me. The things I was proud of, the things I was embarrassed by, the thoughts I never said out loud to anyone else. We talked about our futures constantly, where we'd live, what kind of lives we'd have. We promised, half joking but half serious, that no matter what happened, we wouldn't become those people who drifted apart and only liked each other's posts once a year. And for a long time, we didn't. We went to different colleges, but we stayed close. Late-night calls, long texts, visiting each other whenever we could. When my first serious relationship ended badly, Evan was the one who drove 3 hours just to sit on my couch and let me rant and cry without trying to fix anything. When his dad got sick, I skipped classes and worked to be there with him at the hospital. That kind of shared history makes you feel invincible as a duo. Like the world can change, people can come and go, but this one connection is permanent. After college, I moved back to our hometown temporarily to save money. Evan was already there, working a decent job, renting a small apartment. It made sense to spend more time together again. We fell right back into our old rhythm, gym sessions, late-night food runs, complaining about work, talking about relationships. That's around the time I met Lily. She worked at a cafe near my office. Nothing dramatic or movie-like about how we met, just small talk that turned into longer conversations. She was calm in a way I was, thoughtful. She listened more than she talked. Being around her felt grounding, like my mind finally slowed down. When we started dating, Evan was genuinely happy for me, or at least that's how it seemed. He joked that I'd finally found a normal one. He asked about her, remembered details, made an effort. When I introduced them, the interaction felt natural. Too natural, maybe, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. We all started hanging out together more. It wasn't forced. It just happened. Dinners at Evan's place, game nights, weekend plans that included all 3 of us. I felt lucky, like my 2 worlds had blended perfectly. Looking back now, I realize how rare that feeling is, and how fragile. The first year was smooth, peaceful, even. Lily and I talked about moving in together someday. Evan joked about being the third wheel but always showed up anyway. There was nothing overtly wrong, no obvious lines crossed. But if I'm being honest with myself, the shift started long before I noticed it. It began with subtle distance. Lily would be quieter around me sometimes, distracted. Evan would know things about her day that she hadn't mentioned to me yet. When I asked how he knew, they'd laugh it off and say it came up in conversation. I trusted them both completely, so my brain did what brains do when trust is present. It explained everything away. Evan was just friendly. Lily was just open. That was it. Then there were the looks. Not lingering, not obvious. Just quick glances that ended a second too late. Moments where the room felt slightly misaligned, like furniture shifted an inch overnight. I remember one specific night so clearly now that it almost makes me sick. We were at Evan's apartment, drinking, playing music, just talking. Lily went to the bathroom and Evan leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, you're really lucky." I smiled and said I knew. He nodded slowly and said, "Seriously, don't mess this up." At the time, it sounded like advice. Now it sounds like something else entirely. A few months later, Evan went through a rough patch. Work stress, money issues, loneliness. He started calling Lily more often when I was busy. Again, framed as support, as friendship. And I believed it because that's what friends do. There was one night when Lily didn't answer my calls for hours. She texted later saying she'd been at Evan's place talking because he wasn't doing well. I felt a twinge of discomfort but ignored it. I didn't want to be the jealous boyfriend. I didn't want to insult their intentions. That's the thing about betrayal, it feeds on your best qualities. Trust, empathy, the desire to be fair. Over time, the dynamic shifted more noticeably. Lily and Evan developed their own rhythm, their own humor, their own shared references. I started feeling like I was slightly out of sync when we were together, like I was catching up on conversations that had already happened without me. I asked Lily once, gently, if everything was okay between us. She told me I was overthinking, that she loved me, that nothing was wrong. I wanted to believe her, so I did. The breaking point didn't come in a dramatic explosion. It came quietly, almost politely. One afternoon, I stopped by Evan's apartment unannounced. That wasn't unusual between us. I knocked once and let myself in. They were sitting on the couch, close, too close. Nothing physical was happening in that exact moment, but their reaction said everything. They pulled apart instantly, like teenagers caught doing something wrong. Lily's face flushed. Evan stood up too fast. The silence was heavy, loud. I asked what was going on. They both spoke at once, tripping over explanations. Nothing coherent, nothing convincing. I left without yelling, without slamming doors. I just walked out. That night, Lily admitted it. She said it started emotionally. Long talks, shared vulnerabilities, complaints about life, about me. She said it wasn't intentional, that it just happened. That phrase again. She said they hadn't planned for it to go further, but it did. She said it had been going on for months. Months. While I was planning a future with her. While I was helping Evan financially. While I was trusting both of them with my entire sense of stability. I confronted Evan the next day. He cried. I had never seen him cry like that before. Not when his dad was sick, not when he lost his job, but now. He said he hated himself, said he never meant to hurt me, said he fell for her and didn't know how to stop, said he hoped I'd never find out. That last part destroyed whatever was left of our friendship. Because it meant he was okay living a lie as long as I stayed ignorant. I cut them both off, completely. No dramatic goodbye, no closure conversation, just silence. The aftermath was worse than the discovery. Losing two people at once creates this vacuum. Suddenly, everything reminds you of them. Songs, places, habits, even silence feels different. I questioned everything. My judgment, my memories, my worth. I replayed moments over and over, wondering how I missed it. Wondering if everyone else saw it before I did. Wondering if I was foolish or just loyal to a fault. It's been years now. I've moved, changed jobs, met new people, dated again, smiled again. But there's a version of me that never fully came back. The one who trusted without hesitation. The one who believed shared history meant shared loyalty. Betrayal doesn't just end relationships. It rewrites how you see connection itself. And even now, sometimes, I still catch myself thinking about that old promise we made as teenagers, that no matter what, we wouldn't drift apart. I guess we didn't drift. We shattered. For a long time after everything fell apart, I told myself I was fine. I said it so often that other people stopped questioning it, and eventually I almost believed it myself. I went to work, paid my bills, met friends, did all the normal things people do when their lives are supposedly intact. But there was this constant hum under everything, like static you can't quite tune out. A sense that something essential had been removed and replaced with nothing. The worst part wasn't the loneliness. I could handle being alone. I'd always been good at that. What I wasn't prepared for was the distrust that crept into every corner of my life. Not just with romantic relationships, but with friendships too. Every laugh felt conditional. Every compliment felt like it might be hiding something underneath. I started replaying my entire friendship with Evan from the beginning, but not the way you reminisce. I replayed it like a detective revisiting a cold case, searching for missed clues. The jokes, the advice, the moments where he positioned himself as my protector or my guide. I wondered how much of it was genuine and how much of it was him quietly measuring himself against me. There were nights I couldn't sleep because my brain wouldn't stop constructing alternate timelines. What if I'd noticed earlier? What if I'd said something different? What if I'd trusted my instincts instead of dismissing them as insecurity? It's amazing how betrayal turns hindsight into a weapon you use against yourself. About 6 months after everything ended, I ran into Lily by accident. I was at a grocery store, standing in line, half asleep, just trying to get through the day. I heard my name and turned around, and there she was. She looked thinner, tired, like someone who hadn't been sleeping well either. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stared at each other, both unsure who had the right to say anything first. She asked how I'd been. I gave the automatic answer, "I'm okay." She nodded like she expected that. Then she told me she was sorry, not in a dramatic way, not crying, just tired. She said she thought about me a lot, said she never meant for things to happen the way they did, said she lost more than she realized. I didn't respond the way I thought I would. I didn't yell or accuse. I didn't tell her she ruined my life. I just felt numb, detached, like I was watching a scene from someone else's story. Before we parted, she told me she and Evan were still together. That information hit harder than I expected, not because I missed her, but because it confirmed something I'd been afraid of, that what they did wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a choice, a sustained one. I walked out of the store and sat in my car for almost an hour, just staring at the steering wheel. Not crying, not shaking, just hollow. After that encounter, something shifted. The numbness gave way to anger, not explosive anger, but a slow-burning resentment that colored everything. I stopped romanticizing the past. I stopped framing what happened as unfortunate circumstances. I started calling it what it was. Betrayal. I also started noticing patterns in my other relationships. Friends who only showed up when it was convenient. Coworkers who took credit for work they didn't do. Small betrayals, nothing like what I'd been through, but enough to make me realize how often we excuse behavior simply because it's familiar. About a year later, I got a message from an unfamiliar number. It was Evan. He told me he'd changed his phone and hoped I wouldn't mind him reaching out. He said he understood if I didn't want to respond. Then he sent paragraph after paragraph about how unhappy he was, how the relationship wasn't what he thought it would be, how guilt had followed him every day since. He said he missed me. That word "missed" felt almost insulting. I didn't reply right away. I let the message sit for days. Part of me wanted to unload everything I'd been holding back. Another part of me wanted to ignore him completely. In the end, I sent one sentence. "You didn't miss me when you were lying to my face." He never replied. A few months after that, mutual acquaintances started filling in gaps I hadn't asked about. Apparently, Lily and Evan's relationship had become toxic. Constant arguments, distrust, accusations. Turns out, when a relationship starts with betrayal, it doesn't magically transform into something healthy. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that, just confirmation. What surprised me was how little relief it brought. There was no sense of justice, no closure, just the quiet understanding that damaged people often damage each other in cycles. Around that time, I started dating again. Slowly, carefully. I was upfront about my boundaries, maybe too upfront. I analyzed every interaction for signs of deception. I kept emotional distance even when things were going well. One person I dated asked me once why I seemed so guarded. I didn't know how to explain that when you've been betrayed by the person you trusted most, your brain rewires itself for survival. You stop assuming goodwill. You start assuming risk. Eventually, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't afraid of being betrayed again. I was afraid of not seeing it coming. That fear made me smaller, more cautious, less open. So I started therapy, not because I thought I was broken, but because I didn't want to stay hardened forever. I didn't want one betrayal to define the rest of my life. In one session, my therapist asked me what hurt more, losing my girlfriend or losing my best friend. The answer came instantly. My best friend. Because that loss felt like losing a part of my identity, a witness to my life, someone who knew my past without explanation. She asked me if I thought Evan ever truly valued our friendship. That question haunted me. I think he did, in his own way. I think he valued me as long as I didn't challenge his sense of self, as long as he wasn't tempted by something that made him want more. Some people do betray you because they hate you. They betray you because they prioritize themselves without limits. It's been several years now. I don't know where Evan is anymore. I don't know if Lily found happiness or regret or something in between. I stopped caring enough to ask. What I do know is this: betrayal doesn't always announce itself with drama. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wrapped in familiarity, disguised as trust. And the most painful lesson I learned wasn't that people can hurt you. It was that the people closest to you have the greatest capacity to do so. Still, I'm learning to trust again, not blindly, not recklessly, but intentionally, because closing yourself off completely is just another way of letting betrayal win. I lost a friend, I lost a relationship, I lost a version of myself. But I didn't lose my ability to rebuild. And maybe that's enough. For a while, things were quiet, almost eerily so. Life settled into something that looked stable from the outside. I stopped checking my phone expecting bad news. I stopped bracing myself every time I ran into someone from the past. The sharpness of everything dulled into something manageable. Not gone, but no longer screaming for attention. That's when I made the mistake of thinking I was past it. It happened on a random afternoon, one of those days that doesn't feel important while you're living it. I was at work, half-focused, scrolling through emails, when a name popped up in my inbox that made my chest tighten instantly. Evan. Not a text, not a DM, an email. The subject line was simple. I don't know who else to say this to. I stared at it for a long time before opening it, long enough to consider deleting it without reading a word, long enough to feel my pulse in my ears. Curiosity won out, the same way it always does. He wrote that his life had fallen apart, that the relationship with Lily had ended months ago, badly. He didn't go into details at first, just vague statements about things not working, about trust issues, about becoming people they didn't recognize. He said he'd thought about reaching out countless times and stopped himself every time. He said he wasn't asking for forgiveness. He said he just needed me to know how deeply he regretted everything. There was a line near the end that stuck with me more than the rest. You were the only person who ever really knew me. That line made me angry in a way I hadn't felt in a long time, because it placed the emotional burden back on me, like I owed him something simply because we shared a past. Like his regret deserved space in my life. I didn't respond right away, again. But this time, instead of letting it sit for days, I brought it up in therapy. I read the email out loud. Hearing his words spoken made them feel smaller somehow, less powerful. My therapist asked me what I wanted from the situation. Not what he wanted, what I wanted. And I realized I didn't know. Part of me wanted answers. Part of me wanted acknowledgement. A real one, not the half apologies people give to soothe their own guilt. Another part of me wanted to protect the peace I'd built. That night I replied. Not with anger, not with forgiveness, just honesty. I told him I'd read his message. I told him I believed he regretted what he did. I also told him that regret didn't undo damage, that some losses are permanent, even when the people involved have changed. I told him I didn't hate him, but I didn't trust him either. And that trust was the thing I couldn't give back. He replied almost immediately. Paragraphs again. Apologies again. He admitted things he'd never said before, that he'd been jealous of me for years, that seeing me build something stable with Lily made him feel like he was falling behind, that crossing the line didn't start as attraction, but as insecurity. That admission hit me harder than I expected. Because suddenly the betrayal wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It had roots. It had motives. It had been growing quietly beneath the surface for years. I didn't respond to that message. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something important. Understanding someone's reasons doesn't obligate you to let them back into your life. A few months later, I got invited to a mutual friend's wedding. I almost didn't go, but I forced myself to. I didn't want to live my life avoiding rooms where my past might exist. That felt like letting fear dictate too much. The wedding was beautiful, warm, loud, full of people I hadn't seen in years. For a while I relaxed, I laughed, I drank, I let myself exist without scanning the room constantly. Then I saw him. Evan was standing near the bar, older, heavier somehow, even though he didn't look physically different. He looked tired. When our eyes met, his face went pale. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he walked over. He didn't hug me, didn't reach out, just stood there, hands in his pockets like a kid waiting to be scolded. He apologized again, in person this time. His voice cracked when he said my name. He told me he didn't expect anything from me, that he just wanted me to know he carried what he did every day. I listened. That surprised me. A few years earlier, I wouldn't have been able to stand there without exploding or shutting down. But now, I could listen without absorbing his guilt as my responsibility. I told him I believed he was sorry. I also told him I didn't want a relationship. Not friendship, not updates, not closure conversations. Just distance. He nodded, tears in his eyes, and for the first time I didn't feel responsible for comforting him. That moment gave me more closure than any apology ever could. After that, something finally shifted inside me. I stopped defining myself by what happened, stopped measuring new people against old wounds. I still carried the lesson, but it no longer controlled me. I met someone new, about a year later. I didn't tell her everything right away. I didn't trauma dump or test her reactions. I let trust build slowly, organically. And when I did share the story, she didn't try to fix it or minimize it. She just listened. That's when I realized how different healthy connection feels. No secrecy, no triangulation, no blurred boundaries disguised as closeness. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about Evan, about who we were as kids, about the versions of ourselves that didn't yet know how much damage people could do when they prioritized their own insecurities over loyalty. I don't wish him harm. I don't wish him forgiveness either. I wish him awareness. Because betrayal doesn't start with cheating or lying. It starts when someone decides their needs matter more than the humanity of the person who trusts them. I learned that the hard way. But I also learned that survival isn't about becoming colder. It's about becoming more intentional with who you let close. Some friendships last forever. Some end in ways that teach you exactly why they shouldn't have. And both leave marks. After that night at the wedding, I didn't think much about Evan anymore. Not in the way I used to, at least. He became a background figure in my memory instead of a constant presence. A closed chapter that no longer demanded rereading. I finally felt like I'd moved on in a real way, not just the kind you convince yourself of because time has passed. Life kept going, quietly, steadily. I settled into a routine with my new partner, someone who felt nothing like Lily and everything like what I needed after her. There was no intensity at the start, no whirlwind, just consistency, transparency, the kind of trust that grows slowly but feels solid once it's there. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to go wrong. That illusion lasted about 8 months. It started with a message from an unfamiliar name on social media. I almost ignored it, assuming it was spam or someone trying to sell me something. The message was short. "Hi, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Evan's sister." My stomach dropped. We weren't close, but I knew her. Grown up around each other, shared holidays, family events. She'd always been kind to me. I hesitated before replying, but curiosity won again. She asked if we could talk, said it was important. I assumed the worst immediately. That something had happened to Evan, that he was sick or hurt or worse. Despite everything, my chest tightened at the thought. We spoke on the phone later that night. Her voice sounded strained, careful. She told me Evan had been struggling for a long time. Depression, isolation, a series of bad decisions that compounded on each other. The breakup with Lily hadn't been the end of it. It had been the beginning of a downward spiral. He'd lost another job, burned bridges with friends, pushed away family. And recently, he'd been talking about how much he regretted ruining the one relationship that ever mattered. Mine. She wasn't calling to guilt me. At least, she said she was. She just wanted me to know that he wasn't doing well and that he talked about me often. About how he wished he could go back. About how he finally understood what he'd thrown away. I listened quietly. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. This was the moment I used to imagine when everything first fell apart. The moment where the person who betrayed you realizes the cost, where regret finally catches up to them. And yet, it didn't feel like victory. It felt heavy. A week later, Evan tried to reach out again. Not an apology this time, just a request. He wanted to meet, just once, to talk in person. I debated it for days. I talked it through with my partner, with my therapist, with myself. In the end, I agreed not for him, but for me. We met at a quiet cafe, neutral territory, somewhere public but not crowded. He was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, hands wrapped tightly around a cup he hadn't touched. He looked worse than before, thinner, hollowed out, like someone who'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. We just sat. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he broke down. Not in a dramatic way, no sobbing, just quiet tears he didn't bother wiping away. He told me everything, not excuses, not justifications, everything. He told me about the jealousy he'd carried since we were young, how he'd always felt like he was living in my shadow, even when I never saw it that way. How watching me build something stable made him feel like he was running out of time to prove himself. He admitted that betraying me wasn't an accident. It was a selfish choice, fueled by insecurity and resentment he never dealt with. He said the guilt never left, that every good thing in his life felt undeserved. Then he said something I didn't expect. He said, if I could take it back and lose everything else instead, I would. I believed him. And still, it didn't change anything. I told him the truth, that I didn't hate him, that I wasn't angry anymore. But that forgiveness didn't mean restoration, that some damage permanently changes the shape of a relationship, even if the people involved grow. I told him I hoped he found peace. Just not with me in his life. He nodded, accepted it, and for the first time didn't ask for more. When we stood to leave, he thanked me, not for meeting him, not for listening. For being honest. That was the last time I saw him. A few months later, I heard through mutual contacts that Evan had moved away. New city, new start. I don't know if he found happiness or continued to struggle. I stopped asking. What mattered was that the story finally felt finished. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't before. Betrayal isn't just about what someone does to you. It's about how they force you to rebuild your sense of safety from scratch. It teaches you where your boundaries really are. It shows you the difference between familiarity and loyalty. I lost a best friend, but I gained clarity. I learned that history doesn't entitle anyone to access to your life, that apologies are meaningful, but boundaries are necessary. That closure doesn't always come from reconciliation. Sometimes it comes from walking away without hatred. I still believe in deep friendships. I just believe now that they require more than time. They require respect. And if this story has taught me anything, it's that the people who truly value you will never make you question where you stand with them.